The time to build is upon us.
With great power comes great responsibility.
You know the greatest danger facing us is ourselves. An irrational fear of the unknown.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
This is the Superhuman Academy podcast.
Cool. Thanks for joining. I was looking at your email address, and I was going to ask you, like, what martial arts do you do? Or do you still do any martial arts, or is that a...
I did Kempo karate,
Okay.
and Brazilian jiu-jitsu,
All right.
for several years. I don't train anymore as much formally at the dojo. I do train at home. But yeah, I did it for, I was like 13 years or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
like a big part of our family. And my husband trained, my youngest got her black belt, and then the car crash happened. And what I didn't realize when you have a concussion is that one of the symptoms is neurofatigue. And the neurofatigue has kept me from going back and training
Yeah.
the way.
I was curious about that. I was like, that doesn't seem like the most like conducive to like brain recovery to be doing striking or things like that if you're doing that. So yeah.
That's true. Yeah, fortunately I only got hit, and it was a couple times in the head, that just light taps,
Yeah.
It wasn't anything like bad or concussive or anything like that, because most of your training partners train with control. So
Yeah, you'd hope
pretty
so.
much safe in regards to that. At least at the school that I trained at, safety was like paramount. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I asked. I noticed that the other day I was actually talking to somebody else who I thought might be a good connection for you, and so I passed along your email address, and it's just a unique email address. So mentioned martial arts, and I don't know if I told you this last time we talked, but I train jujitsu, and I've actually got like my own setup in my basement, like a whole room that's like all matted out and everything like that. So
oh man, I am so jealous. I really loved jiu-jitsu. It was such a great workout. I mean,
Yeah.
the core strength and everything. Yeah, and I did get a chance to train with some world black belt champions,
Mhm.
women and
Wow.
men. Um, and so that was pretty cool. Don't ask me their names. Let's see. I think there's Mackenzie Dern. I remember
Oh wow,
Mackenzie's
yeah,
name.
yeah.
And then there was another woman, and I can't remember her name. But yeah, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. In fact, I actually taught beginning Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for women. I had a women's class that I
Oh,
taught.
cool.
Just to encourage them to get out on the mat, because as you know,
Mhm.
it's pretty scary when
Yeah, very
when a
intimidating.
man's like on top of you and trying to choke you out. So
Yeah, it's not.
you kind of have to like take them in the
Yeah.
shallow end and slowly, work them towards the deep
Yeah,
end.
it's some nightmare fuel if you're not ready for it, that's for sure. I used to teach, not really teach, I was like an assistant for a kids class back when we lived in
Oh,
Colorado.
fun.
And I really enjoyed that a lot. But yeah, life moves on, as you know. So I wanted to talk to you about that too. Things have changed in your life over time. Would you be willing to share what that change has looked like?
Sure. So, um, before my car accident, I had been a cardiology nurse practitioner for almost 20 years. And in fact, I was driving to the dojo to train when I got
Oh
the car
wow, okay. I didn't
accident.
know that.
I was prepping for my third degree black belt and my purple belt in jiu-jitsu. So I was in serious fighting
Yeah, no kidding.
shape for that. And then the car accident happened, and I thought, "Oh, I'll just shake this off, get back to work and life." Actually went to work the next day, And then, nurses that I work with were noticed that I had, difficulty with speech and change in personality, or just behavior, and, really encouraged me to see my doctor the next day, which I did. And she told me, "Well, I think you have a concussion, and, I'll take you off work for 2 weeks." And so I left with no follow-up appointment, thinking I'd be better in 2 weeks. So I took 2 weeks off, and I went back to work and my martial arts training, and just tried to get back into life and just struggled and was really persistent. And, um I ended up one day driving home and falling asleep at the wheel
Oh, man.
about 3 months later, and, woke up before my car drove into a tree and was able to slam on the brakes and prevent that. And then, just to give you an idea of how my concussed brain was working at the time, I thought, "Well, I'll just, not mention this to my doctor, and I'll take a nap in my car halfway in between work and home." And I did that, and, fortunately, I had lunch with a colleague who at the time was a neurology nurse practitioner, and she was curious about my recovery, so was asking how I was doing, and I said, "Oh, this and that," and then I fell asleep at the wheel driving home one night, and she's like, "What?" I said, "Oh, yeah, don't worry about it, I just take a nap, in between." She's, "No,
Mm,
this is not good." And, prior to this, I hadn't had any brain scans, had not been referred to a neurologist or anything. So she said, "You need to go back to your primary care doctor, get a brain scan, and get a referral to a physical medicine and rehab doctor," which are also known as physiatrists. And
mm,
they're the better person to see for a concussion or a brain injury because they take care of brain injuries and spinal injuries as
mm,
opposed to a neurologist, especially a general neurologist. They train in taking care of brain diseases such as
mhm,
Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, and epilepsy. So I saw the PMR doctor. She recognized right away that I had a significant concussion, took me off work for 3 months, and then
wow.
referred me to speech therapists and neurotherapists, and that's when I started on the right road of recovery.
Yeah.
And, then as I learned about my, brain injury and ways to cope with it, I was reading books and articles just to help myself get better,
Mhm,
and in the process got really fascinated about the brain and was talking to another friend who called to check to see how I was doing. And I mentioned how I was enjoying reading about the brain. And she said, "Hey, you should become a nurse practitioner because you'd be a great patient advocate." And I was like,
mhm.
"Oh, wow. Yeah, that would be cool." So when I got off the phone with her, just started putting together all the things I needed to convince a manager to hire me in that department. And 2 years later, I got that job, and, I worked there for about 7 years, and then I just recently retired.
Yeah, yeah, so I'd really like to explore, what's the path to recovery from is TBI, is that an appropriate term to apply?
Yes,
Your
yes.
experience? Okay. Traumatic brain injury, because 'cause I'm, yeah, sort of familiar with, like, TBIs and what can happen and things like that from my own, um, education and brain and how it works, but I have not personally experienced a TBI. I haven't worked with somebody closely who's had that. I definitely wouldn't know what to recommend to people other than some basic stuff. And you clearly spent a lot of time figuring that out. So, would you mind maybe educating me? Let's say I was just in a similar accident and I have no idea where to start. What would you recommend to me in that case?
Well, I would really hope that you would come and see me with a friend or a family member,
Okay.
because, so, when you have a brain injury, you don't remember things as well. You can lose your self-awareness, realizing that things are a problem. For example, me thinking it's okay to fall asleep at the wheel. Um, and to see a provider and get evaluated. The first thing you should do is rule out a bleed in the brain within the first 48 hours.
Mhm.
And that can be done with a CT scan or an MRI, brain MRI.
Do you mind if I pause real
And
quick?
yeah.
So the first thing that you came out of your mouth was already something I hadn't thought of, and so I wanted to maybe just highlight that, for, anyone who listens to this conversation. Even if you haven't had a TBI, you're probably not planning on having one. It's very likely that at some point in your life, you might have a friend or something like that who has an experience like this. So just what you said about bringing somebody with you or having somebody who knows and who's, kind of caught up on the situation. I didn't even really think about the fact that, like, if I wanted to go to see a specialist or whoever you're recommending, I should probably bring somebody with me if that were the case who can fill in the gaps and kinda help where, I might be stumbling. So that also helps me think about if someone in my life has an experience like that, um, bringing that up, being that person, whatever, like, making sure they have somebody, not something I thought of. So I just wanted to highlight that for anyone listening who maybe didn't, like, catch that as that's an important first step, get somebody else involved. So, okay, sorry for pausing you, keep going.
No problem, no problem. And then, while they're there, have them write things down so that, your friend who's gonna help you out, your family member, you and the person with the brain injury, have an understanding of the recommendations. And then, make
And
sure
sorry,
that you
who's the first person to go to? Because there's all
oh,
these
your
different types of
primary
doctors. So okay, just
yes,
primary care
no,
first. Okay.
yes, primary care, right, your general practitioner. And then make sure you have a 2-week follow-up after that. Most of the time, they'll just say, "Oh, give me a call if things get worse." Well, that's you can't rely on someone who's had a concussion to remember that or to do that because you
Mhm,
don't know if, they've lost their self-awareness or know what's going on. So,
mhm,
it's really important for that 2-week follow-up, and usually you're sent home with symptoms to watch for, and
mhm,
these are symptoms that usually indicate that there's a brain bleed. But then I like to think of there's a list of soft symptoms, like the hardcore ones where you really should go back to the emergency room, and that is a change in alertness, nausea, vomiting, dizziness, headache, worsening symptoms. Then you would want to go back to the emergency room for reevaluation. But then there's some soft symptoms that you should pay attention to and report, such as headaches that persistent headaches, persistent symptoms of dizziness, light sensitivity, sound sensitivity, uh, cognitive issues, changes in behavior, symptoms of anxiety or depression. So a ton of other symptoms that can play out as the person is as time is passing,
mhm,
and those can usually be picked up at the 2-week mark. And then if the symptoms persist longer than 1 month, going into a second month, then you should start seeing the specialist for those symptoms. You should get a referral to the physical medicine and rehab doctor, PMR. And, say you're having speech difficulty, like you're slurring your words, mixing your words, having difficulty with word finding, then you'd want a referral to speech therapy. If you're having difficulty with focus, concentration, motivation, time management, planning, you would want a referral to speech therapy because they also help not only with speech, but also cognitive functioning.
mhm.
And if you're having symptoms of headaches, dizziness, vertigo, um, then you would want to get a referral to a neurotherapist, and they can help you with your balance, reestablishing your balance, the connection between your brain and your feet, and evaluate if you're having difficulty tracking moving objects with your eyes.
Okay, so you mentioned 2 different types of doctors there. Um, so what was it, PMR? Is that what you called the first one?
PMR.
Okay, and then what was the second one called?
Um, the second
For
one
the
was a
balance
speech
and
therapist.
okay, yeah, sorry, that was yeah, speech therapist. I guess you mentioned 3. Speech therapist, and then that third one with the balance and everything like that. What was that?
A neurotherapist.
Neurotherapist. Okay. I would not know to, like, keep those things straight or separate them or anything like that. So that's helpful. Okay, and I'm also picking up on you mentioned setting a 2-week follow-up and paying attention to the symptoms. I could imagine that being more difficult for somebody who's had a TBI, so that brings up, like, another, importance to having someone who's aware of what's going on. Um, so I'm thinking for myself as, like, a support person of just paying closer attention to, do I notice any changes of behavior, or does this person seem to be exhibiting any um, like light sensitivity or things like that? So it seems like that could be just a good thing to have in the back of my mind if, someone I'm close to is in sort of event that could have caused something, to just be a little bit more aware, paying a little more attention, taking note of things that they might not be taking seriously or just not be in the headspace to really notice. Um, and maybe bring up or ask about.
Exactly, yes, and, some other symptoms that, people aren't aware of is, mood swings, being really emotional. I've had patients report episodes of crying, people could have irritability,
Mhm.
grumpiness, bursts of anger, and this will be someone previously who was mild-mannered. There can also be impulsive behavior, so saying things that they would normally not say, uh, interrupting in conversations, and um, spending money
Mm,
compulsively,
mhm.
gambling, those kinds of things. So every the saying goes that every traumatic brain injury that you see as a provider is one traumatic brain injury you have seen, because
Yeah,
everyone's
they're unique.
symptoms, recovery, and response is going to be as different as their personality.
Mhm. So if you've seen one, you've seen one. No, you've seen them all.
You've
Yeah.
seen one.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. The brain is so complex that I'm sure I know it can malfunction, dysfunction, change function in an infinite number of ways.
Exactly. And, even if you're told that your MRI or your brain, CT scan is normal, that does not mean you have not suffered a concussion or a brain injury. Concussion and brain injury, same thing.
Okay.
Um, so the diagnosis right now is based on, history of symptoms after the impact.
Okay. So the brain scan would be more of, like, supportive and get extra information, but that's not the primary diagnostic tool.
Exactly. Those tools are great to rule out, bleeds in the brain,
Mhm.
significant bleeds that can cause problems, and skull fractures. But they can't, hone down at the cellular level, at the neurons, how they're interacting and connecting, um, and that's where your symptoms are, originating from, is that neurons have died, cells have died, due to the impact, and their connections have been severed. And
Mhm.
so when they try to work, they can't communicate, and that's when you're noticing things aren't working as well. Like, one symptom is hearing overload. And what that is that after a concussion, the brain decides to give every sound in your environment equal opportunity to speak and
Yikes.
transmits everything
That sounds miserable.
into yes, into the hearing centers instead of filtering out background noise and then focusing on the conversation you're having with someone across the table at a bar or restaurant.
Mhm.
So, somebody who has this symptom will get overwhelmed in loud environments and crowded environments or at a table where there's multiple people talking because they don't have the ability to filter and focus their hearing to hear the conversation. And sometimes they'll even report having difficulty with hearing. And when you ask them about that, you can ascertain that it's difficulty with hearing when there are environmental noises such as a radio or a TV on and trying to listen to a conversation. And they're not able to, cut out that background noise and focus on the conversation. And then you can reassure the patient, oh, no, you can hear. It's just you don't have the ability to filter out the background noises, and
Mm.
you can use, like, noise canceling technology to help you with that until the brain filters heal, because they you can if you get the kind that you can adjust the noise counseling, levels, off an app on your phone,
Mhm.
you can raise and lower the background noise, and if you lower it, you can hear conversations, but it helps with that filtering of the
Yeah,
background noise.
it's interesting. Yeah, you kind of, outsourcing that function in your brain a little bit. Um,
Yeah, using external tools to support its function for sure.
yeah. So one thing, like, I wanted to have you on the show because, like, for me, I'm always looking for, how can I upskill, um, and usually that is gonna be in 2 different veins, and so, like, for example, I had Lisa Sugarman on the show recently talking about, suicide prevention, and those things, and I was for that, I'm approaching it from 2 different angles of, one is the angle of, I know somebody who, and then there's, like, the support person angle, and that's a set of skills in terms of helping others. And then there's the, like, I'm in the position, and that's another set of skills. And so I see this as a similar type of thing where I see you're sharing 2 sets of skills here. There's ideas of how you can support somebody who might be experiencing this in your life, which just the way that life works, you're probably gonna have this situation at some point, which is why I encourage people, even though this is, like, a very specific topic, I always encourage people, like, think about the likelihood that you're gonna have somebody in your life who has XYZ experience. There's probably gonna be somebody who has a TBI. There's probably gonna be someone in your life who struggles with suicidal ideation, things like that. It's probably gonna be somebody, and sometime it might be you. And so, like, as I'm listening to what you're saying and thinking about this, I'm thinking about, okay, how can I be more effective as a support person? And now what you're starting to say is also, how can you be more effective as the person who experiences the situation themselves? And so one thing I'm curious about is, as somebody who experienced the TBI yourself, what were the maybe behavioral practices that you found to be most helpful in terms of helping your brain to recover and find new, more effective ways of doing things?
So the number one tool I recommend is journaling.
Okay.
Journaling every day in the morning and at night, and it doesn't have to be elaborate. It just you can just start off with the date and whether you slept well the night before or not. Do you feel like
Mhm.
today is gonna be a good brain day or not, or it's gonna be a bad brain day? Um, but journaling helps you in so many ways. It helps you, um, learn what your symptoms are, and then you can, monitor your symptoms and, um, keep track of what makes your symptoms worse or what has helped your symptoms. And then if you see your doctor for that symptom and they prescribe, say, physical therapy, and it's not helping or making things worse, then you can journal that and then make a note of that before you go to your doctor. Hey, this physical therapy isn't helping.
Mhm.
And this is why. It's supposed to help with this symptom, but it's making it worse this way
Mm.
because your memory is not very good. So you really need to write these things down because otherwise you'll forget. And the other thing is that after a head injury, you can get trapped inside your head with really negative thoughts. And those thoughts can ruminate, going circles and circles. And the journaling helps you get those thoughts out of your head and onto paper, which makes them a lot less scary. And then you can kind of analyze your thoughts as you've written them on paper. And you can decide at that point, this is something that's silly. I shouldn't have this thought. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to work on
Mhm.
letting it go. Or this is a thought I want to share with a friend to help me. Or I need to share this with my therapist, my counselor, my with my talk therapist. And so it really gets you out of your head, which is really important because if you sit in your head, um, you can have increased risk of anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation. And you'll feel lonely. And um, the other thing that the journaling for me helped was when I finally sat down and realized, okay, these brain injury symptoms aren't going away anytime soon.
Mhm.
And for some reason, I decided to write on the left side of the paper all the things I had or did or wanted to do, my goals and passions before my brain injury. And on the right side of the paper, I wrote all the things I thought I gained from my brain injury. And when I was able to do that, I realized all the things that I had lost or wasn't able to do, a majority of them, 80% were things I was no longer interested in because my
Mm.
personality changed with my brain injury. And when I looked at the right, I was like, I really like this person I'm becoming. And what I was actually doing was I was letting go of my old self and embracing the new. And that's
Mhm.
another important step when recovering from a brain injury. If it looks like these symptoms are going to persist and stay a little bit longer than you had planned or thought, this is a good coping mechanism to move forward. I don't mean forget about your old self. I
Mhm.
mean, take that person along with you, but embrace and get to know the new person. And your journaling will help you do that.
Mhm. Yeah, I heard several different skills kinda woven into what you were just talking about. So I heard the journaling, just I mean, writing things down is a skill in itself. Um, I The way in which you're talking about it, you also inserted, like I would call this like a really powerful, like, super learning skill for those who are listening who, listen to the show because they like learning techniques. It's like you described writing down what you're testing and what the results are. And that's I mean, take that outside of TBIs, whatever, that's just a super powerful learning skill of just paying attention to, "I did this, here's what happened. I did this, here's what happened. Did it work? Did it not work?" And then creating the opportunity to try something different. Um, Even if you don't have a TBI, it's kinda hard to keep track of that stuff. And so I'm sure
Yes.
if you do, it just gets that much harder, but, like, that's a valuable skill for anyone to practice, whether they have had a brain injury or not, of, "What did I do today? What worked? What didn't work? What were the effects?" Track those things over time. It's pretty difficult to do that without writing anything down. Even if you are really on it, it's hard to do. Something else I noticed in what you said was you were kind of describing, um, metacognition there with, like, because it's possible, and I nerd out on metacognition, but, like, thinking about thinking, awareness of awareness, whatever, like, taking steps back in your head. Um, if that's something you struggle with, if you find yourself going in these ruminating thought circles, spirals in your head, it might be that you just haven't built the skill of metacognition, of awareness, things like that very much, and it's a trainable skill. And what you were just describing is like an entry point to that skill. It's like maybe the first, easiest way to do it is write down what you're thinking. So that way you can literally look at it like on a piece of paper. Um, and that's a really effective way to break cycles like that you feel trapped in. So, and you mentioned other skills too. I mean, like acceptance and embracing what is, and all those things. Like, there's so many different things that you wove in there that'd be easy to maybe kind of gloss over. It's just like, oh, write some things down. It's like, no, there's actually lots of little micro skills built into that, and I personally find that really empowering because it's not like, oh, I'm just not that type of person. Like, I don't have to think about that. I can just think, well, here's a thing that I can try and I can get better at if just work on it day after day. And I don't have to be amazing at writing. I don't have to be some like Zen guru who's meditating all the time or whatever. But
Yes.
just, get a little bit more awareness, a little bit more acceptance of what is. So anyway, I really appreciated how many different pieces were woven in there. I can tell you've practiced what you're talking about. The way that you describe it is not the way that someone describes it who's just theoretical, like you've done this stuff. So it's really cool.
Yeah, I have
Anything
stacks of
else?
journals.
Yeah, stacks. I imagine the way that you talked about it, like even where you said like even if it's just like writing down the date and like how you slept, like that. I could be wrong, but it kind of sounded like maybe that's where you started, or you've had many days like
Yeah.
that. Is that the case?
Yeah, and there was, days where, I just drew pictures, t
Oh,
you know?
interesting.
Yeah, because I just didn't have anything to write, but just holding a pen and writing on paper or drawing helps reconnect, those neurons in your brain.
Mhm.
So I definitely recommend the journaling onto paper, not on a smartphone with an app or something like that, just because you're not gonna
Okay.
get that same effect, that same brain-hand connection going.
Yeah, that's interesting. One thing I wanted to ask about, this is something that I've recommended to people who struggle with memory, and I'm wondering if you've seen the same thing, is, um, switching things up and breaking habits, or not breaking them per se, but, like, intentionally doing things that differently than how you normally do them. So, like, I normally write with my right hand, writing with my left hand, or just really simple stuff is like, oh, if I get up out of a chair, my instinct is I move both my hands back, I grip the arms, and I push up this way. Maybe instead I will try pushing off my knees, or just switching up, like, really basic stuff you do all the time. I've found that really helps people who have trouble with memory stuff, because part of it is that their attention is just not where they are because they're just on autopilot. And so just by switching things intentionally, it brings their attention to the present moment and forces their brain to try new things and whatever. Is that something that you've seen be effective for TBIs as well, or not so much?
Well, with a brain injury, you have an increased risk of developing dementia later on in life.
Mhm.
And one of the ways that you can prevent dementia is to do try new things, learn new things. The brain loves to be in a rut. It does not, it loves to be cozy in its own little routines.
Yeah,
It
right.
doesn't like being pushed out of its routines. So, like what you said, if you break a habit, start a new habit, a new routine, eat at a different restaurant, walk a different path, then you're actually creating new brain connections. It's called neuroplasticity.
Mhm.
And the more connections you make, it compensates. If you have connections that have been damaged or die, or neurons that die, the more connections you have, the less you're going to notice the effects of aging and getting older. And so, anytime you're pushing your brain to get out of its routine, to learn new things, do new things, and that could be even with movement and dance, where we've shown that that lowers risk of dementia and so forth. And so, yeah, that is definitely a way to kind of enhance your brain's creativity and functioning when you are constantly pushing, learning, doing something different, getting out of your nice cozy little
Mhm.
routine.
Yeah, moving away from the the low calorie, like, right, the brain wants to conserve calories and, like, forcing it to, like, maybe try something different. It's like brain exercise, right? Just doing different things. I was curious, so you worked as a neuro nurse practitioner, did I get that right? Is that what it's called?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So you saw probably thousands of people with brain injuries, right?
I didn't, not because I was in neurology.
Oh,
So,
okay, so more brain diseases then?
yeah, more diseases,
Okay,
so more patients
got it.
with Parkinson's and MS and so forth. But, they really, benefited from seeing me because with Parkinson's and multiple sclerosis, you're having brain cells die.
Mhm,
It's just a different spot in the brain or a different cause, and both those, issues can cause cognitive functioning difficulty, and both diseases come with neurofatigue. And so, in my position, I was able to help people manage their neurofatigue and improve the quality of life and support their brain's health if they had issues with cognitive function. And then I had, occasionally some of my patients, would fall and they would get a concussion. And so then on
mhm.
top of whatever it was they had, Parkinson's, now I have my patient has concussion. So I would manage that along with their Parkinson's. I also took care of patients who had strokes. Um, and then a lot of my patients with epilepsy had a history of a traumatic brain injury. And so I was able to help those people too.
In all that time or just I mean, you know a lot about, like, the research and everything like that too. Are you aware of anything that has been, any lifestyle changes or behavioral changes that have been shown to reliably stop or reverse things like that, like neurodegenerative diseases, or even, like, I don't know if you can't really reverse a brain injury exactly, but, like, I don't know. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, I'm looking for
Yeah, I think what you're asking is what are the things that people can do to support their brain's health?
yeah, what's
Because
been most effective for that?
if once just a brain cell has died, it's gone,
Yeah.
and your brain does it's not gonna function the same way it had prior to whatever caused that issue. Um, but with the things that everybody can do is, number 1 is exercise, and get out in nature because that has proven to help with neuroplasticity, so encouraging more, connections in the brain. Getting out of that rut. So learn a new language, musical instrument, uh, try a different restaurant, try a different recipe, pushing kind of yourself out of your routines. The other one is saying social. So being social can be simply just text messaging or emailing
Mm,
friends and family to the other extreme, volunteering for a community library or group that is contributing to the communities. So being social is really important. You don't want to be socially isolated. And then eating a healthy diet, which is non-inflammatory, low in chemicals, and nutrient dense with vitamins and the fiber and so forth. Because there's also not only is that good for the vasculature of the brain, but it's also supports a healthy gut biome.
mm,
And we're finding more and more that the, brain is very much connected, to the stomach via the vagus
mhm.
nerve, and they talk like 2 little sisters at a sleepover. So, they're very, very connected, and, the connection's amazing, and, how you can do that is really just kinda eating closer to the ground and farther away from the factory. So,
Mhm,
choosing to eat the orange rather than drink the orange juice, choosing to eat the olive rather than having olive oil, and
mhm.
avoiding anything that's packaged because packaging has additional chemicals that you don't really need, especially when your brain is healing. to be leaving that up to your body to process. So
Mhm.
just really eating fresh, down to the ground kind of foods and avoiding foods that are high in saturated fat or limiting foods that are high in saturated fat, which cause vasculature narrowing and things like heart attacks and strokes. And that would be animal proteins. So you would want to limit meat, chicken, fish, eggs, and dairy because they have saturated fats in it, and those can clog up your blood vessels. And not only just the large vessels, which you'll see with strokes and heart attacks, but they actually clog up the microvasculature in the heart and the brain. And usually, when you see someone who has symptoms of mild cognitive impairment leading to dementia, you'll see, and even patients with Parkinson's, you'll see on their MRI um, ischemic changes, microvascular ischemic changes, and that's due to high cholesterol, diabetes,
Mhm.
and hypertension. And we all know that you can control those chronic diseases by eating a healthy diet, a fresh diet of vegetables and fruits, legumes and grains and so forth.
Mhm. I remember when I first heard that most of the body's serotonin is produced in the gut, like,
Yes,
that was mind-blowing to me. I
it
was
is
like, "Oh, wow."
mind-blowing.
'Cause serotonin is extremely important for your, brain function and your mood and all sorts of facets of your health, including your sleep, because it's a precursor to melatonin and all those different things. So, yeah, super connected. I wanted to ask, is there, maybe on the dark side, what are maybe the most common things that people are doing that they may not be aware of or not think of that are harming their brain or setting themselves up for issues down the line?
And not sleeping well. So the brain needs 7 to 9 hours of sleep at night or in a 24-hour cycle. And people don't realize that when you go to sleep, that's when your brain goes to work.
Mhm.
When you go to sleep, your brain is cleaning house, so it's opening up the vasculature and the system and cleaning out all the waste products. If you have a healing brain, it's cleaning out the dead cells. So you really need to give your brain that 7 to 9 hour window of sleep to accomplish that. When you go to sleep, that's when the things that you have learned or conversations you had that are stored in the hippocampus. So, the hippocampus of the brain is kind of like a memory stick for your computer. But when you go to sleep, that's when your brain connects the hippocampus to the cortex and downloads all those things that you've learned and want to remember going forward. So if you're not allowing the brain time to do that, that download doesn't happen. And so you don't learn as well. You don't remember things as well. It's difficult to focus. Um, and the other thing is when you sleep, your brain manages stressors. So if
Mhm.
you had an argument with someone, the saying says, "Oh, just go to sleep on it."
Yeah.
It's true. You sleep on it, and your brain will soften the stressor or the trauma or whatever that occurred, and softening it helps your brain cope with it better the next day or
Mhm.
down the road. And that's why some people say, um, y- uh, you'll grieving gets kind of better over time, and that's
Yeah.
because your brain is processing those emotions. And so when you're getting 6 hours or less of sleep at night, you're really inhibiting your brain's ability to function and stay healthy.
Mhm.
And there is research that supports that people who have sleep years of sleep disorders or who typically get 6 hours or less of sleep at night have an increased risk of developing dementia.
Mhm. That
And it
makes sense.
also increases your risk of cancer, strokes, um, heart attacks, diabetes, weight gain, all kinds of things.
Yeah, I think at one point I looked into it and it was chronic sleep deprivation, which does not mean not sleeping. It means just not getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. Um, was directly linked to 8 out of the 10 top causes of death, and indirectly linked to the other two. It was
Yeah.
linked to all of them, and not in an insignificant way either, which is pretty crazy. And I've talked to so many people, like a lot of people I coach, they're ambitious. Um, they would consider themselves high performers, and it's really common for people to tell me, like, "Oh, yeah, I probably get, like, 6 hours of sleep a night, but, I can just operate on that, like, I'm used to it. I I do just fine on that. Honestly, if I sleep longer, I feel kinda groggy, like, I prefer to sleep that amount." And I tell them, but it might mean more coming from you, like, "Yeah,
No,
you're."
they don't listen to me either.
Yeah, they might. They might, though. Like, yeah, you can get used to it, like, your body and your brain are very
Yes,
adjusting to things, but getting used to it's not the same thing as it being good for you long term.
exactly.
Can you give me a an extra thumbs up on that one? Is that true?
That is very true,
Alright,
that's
great.
what it basically comes down to is that, yes, you've, acclimated to operating on less sleep, but, it doesn't mean you're operating to your full capacity, and it doesn't mean, that yeah, you can't that your brain's not functioning at its full potential. And things happen, not only these, chronic, issues can develop with, sleep deprivation over time, but you can even people I think it's like 20% of car accidents are caused by sleep deprivation.
Wow. Yeah.
Yes, because you can have micro sleep, where your brain
Yeah.
sleeps on you while you're driving.
Yeah, which makes sense because we've all automated, like, driving is such an automatic function for us at this point, like, people don't have to think very hard when they're driving, and so your brain's probably like, "Okay, this is pretty easy, I can probably just, take a quick little doze here," these, like,
Yep.
little micro doses, and we don't feel most people don't feel unsafe when they're driving, even though it's probably the most unsafe thing that most people do in a day is driving, but it's just so mundane, it doesn't feel unsafe. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually very cognitive taxing. So, even though you're maybe operating, on automatic,
Mhm.
it takes a lot of energy, for the brain to drive, and that's, why I fell asleep at the wheel, because I was done and depleted at the end of the day of work, and then demanding more of my brain, and my brain didn't have that reserve to contribute. And
Mhm.
and I usually tell my patients, "You really do need to take neurofatigue seriously because it's neurofatigue is different than regular fatigue." Neurofatigue is when you're tired, your brain will shut you down. People have fallen asleep at the wheel. They have fallen asleep eating, and their face is in their spaghetti. It
Yikes.
is serious. And the difference between, neurofatigue and regular fatigue is that, um, regular fatigue can be, diminished, with a nap or sleeping, but with neurofatigue, people after a brain injury or a stroke or have Parkinson's disease or multiple sclerosis, when they go to sleep, they don't wake up refreshed, no matter how much sleep they have.
Mm.
They're gonna still wake up with an operating battery cell of 50%, 75% at best, and that's all they get for the day, and once that's gone, they are done, and if you don't take it seriously, you could drive home and fall asleep at the wheel like Kelly.
Yeah, don't recommend that. I wanted to
No.
ask you too, I think I've heard this, you're not supposed to go to sleep, like, right after a concussion, but I don't know why that would be. Is that true?
No, not anymore.
Oh, okay.
You can, go to sleep, but yeah, you should be watched for the first 48 hours, like I said before, to make sure that, you don't have a brain, bleed.
Oh, was that
Um,
just, like, because if you
yeah,
did have a brain bleed and then you went to sleep, you might not catch it soon enough? Was that
yeah,
okay,
mhm.
I see.
And if you think that someone hit their head that hard that you're worried about them not going to sleep, take them to the emergency room and have them evaluated
Yeah,
instead
that
of
makes
doing
sense.
a wait and see. It's better to find out everything's okay than, to find out, that you should have gone in sooner rather than later.
Are there any more obvious indicators that it would be like there might be a brain bleed, like, immediately?
Um, yeah, it's, you'll have, like, sometimes you'll have, the pupils will be uneven, dilated,
Oh, wow. Okay.
just really bad headache, dizziness, vomiting, nausea, inability to stand up, um, uh, difficulties talking, stunned kind of look. Um,
Okay, so
I'm
that it
sorry, I'm
seems like
probably
if it
forgetting some.
no, no, that's okay, seems like if it happened, I mean, I would probably take somebody to the ER if I saw that anyway, so
Yeah.
hopefully it'll be pretty obvious.
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing too is that you don't have to lose consciousness to suffer a concussion either. And that was another myth is that, oh, you didn't lose consciousness, you're fine. And that's not true. You don't have to lose consciousness to have a mild TBI impact your life in a devastating way.
Mhm. Is it true though that if you do lose consciousness, then you definitely had a concussion?
Yeah,
Or is
you should definitely, and you should go to the emergency room. Don't pass go and collect $200.
okay, okay, I got it. So if somebody has some head trauma and they do lose consciousness, ER every time?
Yes.
Fair rule of thumb? Okay, cool.
Yeah. Or if they have a seizure. Sometimes some people will have a seizure after hitting their head or, falling.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, it's good to know because it's like, um, especially if the person is someone who's just kind of a tough it out, rub some dirt in it kind of person, the temptation
Yeah.
might be like, "Oh, well, they say they're fine. I guess they're probably okay. They'll just sleep it off or something." And you're saying, "Probably not
No.
very smart." Like, go
That's when you tell your friend, "No. Get in the car. We're going to the ER."
okay. Get in the car and you're not driving.
Yes.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, well, we've had a long conversation without ever mentioning the fact that you actually wrote a book about your journey, and that I think from our last conversation, in that book, you don't just talk about your journey, but you also talk about like the kind of path of resources that people can take if they've experienced a TBI or someone that they care about has. Could you just share briefly about what's in there, what people could look for in there?
Yes. So it's after the crash, how to keep your job, stay in school, and live life after a brain injury. And it's when I wrote the book, I had difficulty, going back to work, and I was extremely anxious when I was supposed to go back to work because I didn't know what I needed to support my brain's function. And so the first 2 weeks before I went back to work, I was reading all my books, looking on my online resources, and just really anxious and worried, and I didn't want anybody else to go through that. So that's why I wrote the book, and in my book, I put strategies that can help you cope with your brain injury symptoms while at work. Because I wanted all the information, the tools that I used in my bag, I wanted to share it immediately in the book. And it's really easy to read. You can get those strategies right away. Like you said, it lists brain injury symptoms and the specialists that you can see, ask for referrals to. It has the 5 pillars of your recovery, which, we've talked about. So getting sleep, um, nutritious, diet, exercise, mindfulness, which is the journaling, and, financial health. And we talked a little bit about that, with the, impulsive behavior,
Mhm. Oh,
impulsive
yeah.
spending. And with that, I also talk about utilizing things such as the Family Medical Leave Act to help protect your job, and when to consider and how to ask for job accommodations if you need them, when to consult a lawyer or a financial planner.
Mhm.
And then at the end, I talk about how to, about getting back onto the road. after your brain injury, and that's uh, uh, letting go of the old and embracing the new. Some family issues that can occur when your role in your family changes, and just know that there's hope that in time you will get better.
Mhm. I can imagine, especially if you sustained your injury while driving, that getting back on the road could be really difficult. Like, even if you're physically capable, just the mental challenges of that. Like, I had a like a mountain biking accident, and I didn't bike again for a year, and when I got back on my bike, I like, consciously, I was, like, not worried, but the back of my brain was just like, "Nope, don't do this," and I was shaking, my heart rate skyrocketed, and I just, like, tipped over and fell off. You know?
Oh, yeah,
So
'cause you can have PTSD
yeah.
after something like that. A car accident, a fall, or a biking accident, for sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
And you're gonna need to see, a psychologist to help work through that so that you can drive. Because, most of us in the US, we have to drive to get to
Mhm.
work, and
Yeah,
if you're having panic attacks behind the wheel, you need to get support and help for that, for sure.
yeah. Well, I'm really glad
And,
that you wrote. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say if your listeners go to my website, kellytuttle.org, they can find my book and more information, but I'm also gonna be publishing an ebook that talks about getting back on the road, and
Oh, great.
it talks about getting cleared to drive from your doctor to make sure you're safe to drive, but then it goes into more detail about getting back behind the wheel of your life and taking the control back.
Mhm. And last time we spoke, I think you mentioned starting some sort of community or resource hub or something like that. Am I remembering correctly? Or
Yes, I have a Substack, so people can find me there at Mindful Return, and I am gonna be launching a online program for people who really want, to hone in on the return to work support, uh,
Mhm.
so that will be available. And then, also on my website, I have a freebie for your listeners, and I call it a stressless medical worksheet. And they can go to my website and download that for free. And what it is it's a questionnaire that you would fill out prior to seeing your doctor, and this could be used for anyone.
Hmm,
And it's the questions your general practitioner or your doctor or specialist want to know in order to make a diagnosis and develop a plan of care for you.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and it has spots to write down questions, medication refill requests, are there tests you want to have done? You can write that all down, and then, a place where you can take notes of what your doctor recommends. And then for my readers and followers, I recommend taking that form and stapling it inside their recovery journal so you can keep your appointments in chronicle order and the recommendations and so forth, all together in one place.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you wrote the book from your perspective of someone who went through it and tried to figure out how to make it easier for other people. Because just looking around online, uh, you'll find all sorts of random stuff pulling you in different directions for anything that you look for.
Yeah.
And so having a kind of linear path that's written from a first person perspective, I always find that much more helpful. And I also want to encourage people listening, like the perspective I usually take here too. Like I don't have a TBI. I'm thankful for that. I might at some point in the future, but I'm also thinking again about other people in my life and just having the knowing that, all right, if somebody experiences this, I have someone I could talk to. Like I could reach out to you again, probably.
Yeah,
Like I could check out your book. Even that like medical worksheet, I could see that being useful, even if it's not TBI related. Just like if I don't know
exactly.
what to think about when I'm going into the doctor's office of what question, like that's just not something I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out, and I'm glad someone else has, right? So um, yeah, I really appreciate you did all that and that you have made that available, and I want to keep that in mind for I have like a continuing resource list that I keep of like stuff that isn't stuff I use every day, but if something happens, I'm gonna wanna have it on, like, speed dial, basically, easy to find. So, even if you're not experiencing a TBI or have someone in your life who's experienced a TBI recently, put bookmark this stuff. Like, put it on your list so you can find it again when something happens instead of scrambling and starting from scratch. That's my plug for you. Everyone. So, um, any any final thoughts you'd like to share with me or anyone who might be listening?
Yeah, if you're thinking that you need job accommodations, check out askjan.org, JAN.org. It is a HR website that
Hmm.
employers use for accommodations. So if you're thinking, you can go on that website and it has like diseases like seizures, brain injury, multiple sclerosis. You can click on that section and it'll give you a list of accommodations that are reasonable that you can ask your employer to support your functioning at work.
Wow, okay. I didn't know about that. Thanks for throwing that in
Yeah, a
there.
lot of people don't know, so
Yeah,
I like to share
this
that.
is the sort of stuff that if you haven't gone through it yourself and been through all you just don't know about. So, thank you for sharing that.
For
Alright,
sure.
well, it was a pleasure speaking with you again. I look forward to staying connected and, I mean, this is just for you, not for the audience, but, like, if you have other things that you produce or you'd like to let people know about or people that you'd like to connect to, let me know because I wanna get your word out there and make sure people know what resources they have access to.
Thank you, Colin, I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly.
The Superhuman Academy podcast is hosted by Collin Jewett and designed and edited by Army Cinco, with original music by Joshua Schunig and voiceovers by Corey Page Schunig. That's me. You can find past episodes and resources, as well as access to the ever-growing Superhuman Academy community at superhumanacademy.com. If you like the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice.